Hello, Victorian rulers from around the globe. I am the Ottawa Welshman, known here on YouTube for some wacky Vicky 3 content. And today, I'm partnering with Paradoxinteractive to bring you a full and comprehensive guide on how to navigate the new Diplomatic Treaty system in the brand new Charters of Commerce expansion DLC. In this video, we'll cover the basics of diplomatic treaties, understanding treaty articles, binding periods, treaty termination, and the consequences of non-fulfillment, including enforcing treaties by war, the renegotiation process, and finally, historical treaties and treaty ports. Feel free to skip to any of the timestamps on screen for that specific chapter. Diplomatic treaties, the basics. Diplomatic treaties are a new way to engage with other nations, allowing you to combine multiple diplomatic actions as well as trade into one single agreement. You may have read about the complete overhaul of international trade routes in Vicky 3, as mentioned in this dev diary here. As a result, these diplomatic treaties have become a crucial gameplay mechanic, and you'll need to know about them in order to dominate the planet. Instead of relying solely on autonomous trade routes from the rest of the world, you can now use these treaties to establish specific trade agreements with different countries. Moreover, you can also work militaristic and diplomatic deals. Overall, this ensures a more controlled, complex, and strategic approach to building your nation and advancing to world domination. But enough talking about it. Let's start making some deals and you'll slowly begin to understand how game-changing these treaties actually are. Let's say we're playing as the mighty sovereign nation of Canada over here, and we wish to enter into an agreement with our American neighbors and friends. Well, we can simply open our treaty menu here where you see both of our rulers and begin building a deal. Understanding treaty articles. Now we have presented in front of us the various articles we can add to the treaty. Articles are the building blocks of any good deal. They can be mutual, meaning that they affect both sides equally. These are things such as alliances or defensive pacts. Alternatively, they can be directional, where one party commits to a specific action. These are things like the sale of specific goods or transferring wealth. One of the other important distinctions of articles is that they may or may not require specific good inputs, like military access that allows foreign armies to march through your land, or trade privileges, where one country grants favorable conditions to traders of another country. These types of articles do not require specific inputs. Alternatively, you have options that do require inputs, such as transferring wealth or goods, which require you to select the amount you wish to transfer per week or the specific good you wish to transfer. When the AI wishes to have an article in a treaty, it produces a positive attitude as seen on the bottom here. And when putting together a deal, the attitudes from each article are added together, along with some other factors, to create a likeliness that another nation will accept your proposed treaty. A positive 100 attitude is required to guarantee a treaty will be signed. So let's get back to the deal we're setting up with the United States. In this deal I've set up here, I've included a defensive pact for both nations. This is one of those mutual articles. I've also agreed to pay them £1,000 per week in exchange for 20 tools per week being sent back, which is a directional article that required me to select the good and the amount. I've also included the state transfer of Southern Colombia to sweeten the deal. You'll note you can also name each and every treaty. This adds a layer of customization that makes the gameplay a lot more fun. I'm gonna name this one the Best Friends Treaty. You can also spice up the deal by adding an obligation into the mix. Here's a deal I'm setting up with the French Republic. These obligations function very similarly to the way they did before, and they essentially turn the treaty into a favor from one country to another. Once the treaty is over and everyone fulfills their part, it will grant one side the obligation that can be used for later negotiations to acquire a better deal, or something else that they want. But getting back to this deal I'm crafting with the US, once we're happy and confident that our treaty will propel our nation to world supremacy, the last thing we need to do is define a binding period for how long the treaty should be in place. With that said, I'm really satisfied with this treaty. We can go ahead and lock it in. Now that the treaty's been accepted, you'll notice it here under the Diplomacy tab. You can also find it under this Diplomatic Treaty tab. When clicking on it, you can see all the details of the treaty, including the binding period here at the top, binding periods, and termination. If you decide you want to end the treaty before the binding period lapses, this can lead to some pretty serious consequences. For example, gaining the untrustworthy country modifier that will make it more difficult to create treaties in the future. On the flip side, however, once this period is over, either party can now end the treaty without any consequences at at all. But if you're still both happy with this best of friends treaty you've set up, it'll stay in place until someone decides to remove it. But let's jump back to a few months into the treaty. If circumstances change, however, and you decide midway through you want to alter your strategy because you need those valuable pounds to wage war and conquer a territory you lost in the past, well, you can always renegotiate existing treaties. Treaty renegotiation. This process allows you not only to modify articles, but inputs or binding periods. However, some articles that take effect as soon as the treaty's signed, like this state transfer that we had done, is definitely not renegotiable. So keep that in mind. As we know, however, events on the world stage may force a nation to fail to meet a treaty obligation. This can be categorized in two ways. The first being a serious breach. These are things like not honoring a defensive pact. This will have more impactful consequences than, say, a minor breach, where a country might fail to deliver goods. In this example, if the US were not able to provide us with our coveted tools, because their only source of production had been taken over in a war, for example, well, the treaty will be paused on our end, meaning we don't have to fulfill any of these obligations. However, the US will still have to honor the remainder of their obligations while they try and get their tools back online, and the deal will only resume once they restart sending us our tools again. But let's say we have military supremacy over one of our neighbors and want to set up a favorable deal for us. Well, if the other party doesn't want to participate, you can always escalate the situation by enforcing the articles through war. For example, trying to set up a treaty here with Mexico where they pay us 6,000 gold per week and are not allowed to trade any of their cloth with the rest of the world, well, they would never go for this. But if we were to get into a war with Mexico, we could add a war goal to enforce these treaty articles. And after moving some troops around and enforcing the war goals, the new treaty will be set up where they will be forced to pay per month. This adds a new strategic layer to diplomacy, where treaties can lead to conflicts if they're not agreed to. Historical treaties and trade ports. With this DLC, the game has also implemented new historical treaties. A great one being the Luso-Chinese agreement you can see here. This agreement is present at the beginning of the game, and the Great Qing Empire offers a treaty port in their land in exchange for a small sum of money per week. There are other historical treaties too, like the Treaty of Peace, Amity, and Commerce between the Kaiser of Austria and the Two Sicilies. Treaty ports have also been overhauled in this new DLC, where they require a treaty of some sort to function correctly, either agreed to voluntarily or enforced through war. And this sums it up for your basic tutorial on diplomatic treaties in the brand new Victoria 3 Charter of Commerce DLC. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I've been the Ottawa Welshman from YouTube. If you found this tutorial helpful, subscribing to the Paradox channel below will offer you a wealth of knowledge on all things Vicky 3. In the next tutorial coming out, the brand new company charters feature will be described. What are your thoughts and tips on these new diplomatic treaties? Feel free to leave them in the comments. And if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.